All right, we are live.
All right, welcome. I want to thank everybody for joining the community prep meeting from Councilmember Shama Sawant's office. My name is Adam Zimkowski, and we're here. We have a potentially very big day for renters. Today, the Seattle City Council will be discussing two critical pieces of legislation, two very important renter protection bills from our office, from Councilmember Shama Sawant's office, and our renters' rights movement. Those two bills are requiring landlords to give 6 months notice for any rent increase and requiring landlords to pay relocation assistance if they raise rents by 10% or more. And as a result, renters have to move because of it. We want landlords to have to pay 3 times rent so that they're going to be making a lot of money by jacking up the rents. We don't think that working class renters and communities should have to shoulder all the costs associated with the massive displacement that we've seen because of the rampant rent increases across the city. We're going to be talking a lot about the legislation. We're going to be talking about how we can most effectively pressure city council. And in just 28 minutes, everybody watching here will hopefully be signing up for public comment so that we can pressure city council with the biggest possible power that we have. We should note, and in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to go to Nick Jones in our office. He's going to show us all how to sign up for public comment so that we can be ready to sign up right at noon when that public comment period opens up. We should note that the corporate landlord lobby is mobilizing today. We've already received just about 28 emails. Now, we should recognize that our movement has sent in hundreds of emails. We've had 15,000 people sign a rent control petition, which also includes demands for these renter protections. But nonetheless, we know that the landlord lobby is going to be mobilizing. They're going to be trying to sign up very early so that they can pack the public testimony early on. And so our movement should be ready to sign up right at noon when that public comment period opens. So many of you have already probably done this before, but in the event that there's some people who have not, let's go ahead right now, go to Nick Jones, who's going to show us exactly how to sign up for public comment so we're ready when that noon hour opens up. Go ahead, Nick.
Thank you, Adam, and thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Hopefully you're familiar with this process and possibly my voice at this point. But as Adam said, we really want to make sure we're all prepared to bring our maximum pressure as a grassroots renters' rights movement into the city council later today at 2 p.m., which means all of us need to sign up for public comment. The easiest way to do this, of course, you're going to have to find this page. It should be pretty straightforward. You should be in any of your browsers, whatever you're using, you should be able to just type in Seattle public comment. It should take you to, this link right here. It should be the top one, seattle.gov council. Should say public comment. It should be the first one pretty much on any browser. Hopefully easy to find for folks. It should take you to this page. And in about 26 minutes, there'll be a form that's going to go live right here that we're all going to fill out together. That once we complete, we'll make sure that we're signed up to give public comment when the council meeting happens at 2 p.m. later today. So as we kind of go through this community prep meeting, make sure you have this page open, refreshing as we get close to the noon hour so that we can make sure that our voice makes a serious impact at the meeting and we can all get first on the list of public commenters, so the landlord lobby isn't able to kind of just dominate the conversation and try to push us out. It's absolutely pivotal that we bring our fighting movement into all these meetings where we're, really trying to win these incredibly crucial reforms that can make a massive impact in all of our lives as working class renters. So yeah, hopefully everyone has this page pulled up, and we'll come back here in about 25 minutes to fill it out together. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Nick, for showing people how to sign up for public comment. And it's of course critical that we all do that. We'll sign up at noon and then the council meeting begins at 2 p.m. And it always begins with that public comment. And we know because of experience that this public comment can have a tremendous impact on the outcome of these votes, particularly on legislation like this, where we see a landlord lobby, which is going to try to distort. They're going to try to lie. They're going to try to make it seem like small landlords are going to be negatively impacted, and there's no essential benefit from from passing these legislation. So we're going to talk a lot about how we can combat those arguments and really effectively pressure City Council. Before going into that, though, I just want to express, I'm sure many of the people watching know, we want to express solidarity with Seattle's unionized carpenters who, again, as folks probably know, are currently on strike. They're fighting for higher wages, among other things like free parking, like benefits, like a raise of $15 over a 3-year contract to keep up with the skyrocketing cost of living in Seattle and the surrounding area. Many of you were probably at the Solidarity Rally, community rally with a number of carpenters, but also other union speakers from UAW 4121, from Seattle, rank and file Seattle Education Association members, and a really exciting rally. So we want to stand in solidarity with Seattle's unionized carpenters. Councilmember Salwant has released a statement, which we'll put in the chat. And so we want to just express that solidarity. And obviously, Seattle's unionized carpenters themselves are impacted as working people, as working class renters by these renters' rights legislation that we're putting forward today. It's no coincidence that we've seen such huge support for the demands, these basic renter protections that are going to be voted on at 2 p.m. today by City Council. It's no coincidence that there's huge community support. Working class renters make up the majority of this city. And we've seen just since the start of this year, 25.6% rent increases. That is going to cost the typical renter in Seattle more than $4,500 per year to absorb those additional rent costs. Currently, Seattle renters are only given 2 months notice by law from landlords to when they're facing these rent increases. Now, any working class person knows that that is not enough time to absorb an increased cost, especially the exorbitant cost that we're seeing to rents for Seattle renters, but especially if you have to move. Oftentimes moving, if we have working class families, that means moving kids to another district. So we think that it is clearly necessary, and talking with thousands of people across the city, 6 months notice, requiring landlords to give 6 months notice for any rent increase is the minimum that the Seattle City Council, these are representatives elected to serve the interests of ordinary people, of community members, working class, and especially marginalized communities who we know are disproportionately impacted by these skyrocketing rents, especially by evictions. It's the duty of the Seattle City Council to stand with these working class renters and not with the corporate landlords. So something as basic as giving 6 months notice for any rent increase, we want to make that demand really clearly to the Seattle City Council today at 2 p.m. as they'll be voting on that legislation. One thing that's important to note, and when we're making our public comment, in the committee, we did see an attempt by Councilmember Peterson to water down the legislation, to make it seem like only big landlords or to make it seem like some renters should not be protected by this legislation, that it would be in the interest of both renters and of some landlords to have it only apply to renters in buildings whose owners have a certain number or more of units. Now, what we've seen time and time again is that inserting these kinds of loopholes, watering down, all that it does is give corporate landlords the ability to not give this benefit to the overwhelming majority who really need 6 months notice in order to absorb any cost of any rent increase. We see time and time again corporate landlords setting up numerous LLCs, these small corporations, to undermine and to skirt these laws when these kinds of loopholes are inserted in. So we want to make it very clear that we want 6 months notice for any rent increase. We don't want any watering down. We don't want any loopholes. All renters in Seattle deserve this basic right. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the relocation assistance legislation, and then after that, we're going to go to Alvin, who's going to talk about the movement that's been building around these renter protections, but also around demand like rent control over the last several months. We'll also talk about some of the victories that our movement has won just since this year started and how we've won them, because it's going to be critical that we employ the same kinds of fighting tactics, the same kind of pointed pressure on the council members as they're taking these votes, because as we indicated at the top, and if you're just now joining us, we know that the corporate landlord lobby is mobilizing around this council meeting. We've gotten a couple dozen emails, which of course is not a lot when you talk about the numbers on our side of community who have asserted that we need these basic renter protections. But in terms of the kinds of people who are sending these emails, we got an email this morning to city council members from, I believe it's called Thrive Properties, which is one of Seattle's major evictors. It's a big corporation who's announced its opposition to these pieces of legislation, to both the 6 months notice and the relocation assistance legislation. Let me talk briefly about this economic eviction assistance ordinance, or what we want to do is require landlords to pay 3 times rent anytime landlord receives a rent increase of 10% or more and has to move as a result of it. We want the landlord, we think the city of Seattle council members should pass a law making landlords pay relocation assistance. That would be 3 months rent if a renter has to move because of a 10% or higher increase. Obviously, if the landlord is jacking up the rent by 10% or more, then they're going to be making a lot more in profits because of jacking up the rent. And as a result of that move, we know that there are thousands of dollars of costs, the moving costs, the cost of finding another apartment, and likely it won't be at the same rent. It'll be at a higher rent because all of the rents across the city and across the region are rising. If you have to move out of the city, that's additional cost. We don't think that renters, working class people, especially communities of color, who are most impacted by these rent increases, we don't think that these communities, our community, should have to shoulder all the costs of this mass displacement. We think that big landlords should have to pay a portion of these costs in the amount of 3 times rent. Now, this is a big deal because it's going to cost tens of millions of dollars. It's going to transfer tens of millions of dollars from the biggest corporations. We're talking about corporations like Thrive Properties who are making hundreds of millions of dollars during a pandemic, going to transfer millions of dollars from the pockets of those big landlords to working class renters who desperately need it as they're trying to find a new home after facing a significant rent increase. So we know that we're going to face opposition. We know council members are going to get pressure from these big landlords. So we want to make it very clear that we won't accept anything other than a yes vote on this legislation, the strongest possible legislation. And I want to be very clear that we already, out of this committee, already have to beat back an amendment which was inserted and which actually passed, I believe just by 1 vote. It was an amendment to water down this economic eviction assistance by adding a means test to say that you only apply if you're making 80% or less of area median income. Now, we've seen time and time again that all these means tests do is make it harder for people, for renters, working class people, to get assistance that they would apply, that they would be eligible for. We also know that 80% AMI is not a huge amount, especially when you're living in Seattle. If we have a means test that eliminates people making more than 80% AMI, that means nurses, teachers, unionized trades workers who also more and more are struggling to afford to live in this city and being displaced by the thousands from our city. In a bit, we'll hear more about stats about the tens of thousands of Seattle renters facing eviction, the precarity that so many renters face in trying to live in the Seattle area. But before that, we got about 15 minutes before the public comment period opens. Let's go ahead and hear from Alvin Maragori in our office. He's a community organizer. He's going to talk about some of the exciting movement building that a lot of people have been doing over the last several months around these demands and around the demand for rent control. So Alvin, go ahead and take it.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Alvin, and I'm a community organizer in Councilmember Swan's office. And like Adam mentioned, I'm here to talk about the massive community support and that we've gotten in our rent control signature collection. We've been collecting rent control signatures for a few months now, ever since the beginning of the summer, and it's just been an overwhelming response from community members. I mean, renters, teachers, construction workers, all members of working class society like agree that Seattle desperately needs these strong rent control protection as well as strong tenant protections as well. And There's a stat that came out that 60,000 Seattleites are going to be evicted as soon as moratorium expires. And at our tables, like we hear countless stories of people who are just one missed payment away from being evicted, and from corporate landlords who are raising rents as much as 100% in some cases. And with only 2 months notice for rent increase, it's pretty much the same as an eviction notice for many working class people. And we've been out all across the city in every single district throughout the summer. We've been talking to people about how to get involved and demand a city council vote yes on rent control, as well as these other important tenant protections like the 6 months written notice and the economic eviction assistance, which is coming for a vote today. And we've been everywhere. We've talked to thousands of people in the University District, in West Seattle, Columbia City, Beacon Hill, Green Lake, at all the various farmers markets and protests and marches throughout these past couple of months. And it's been, again, very overwhelmingly clear. Over 15,000 people have signed our petition, really just demonstrating that working people are fed up with the insane rents and are looking for a way to fight back against the corporate landlords and real estate developers who are responsible for gentrifying, whole communities and pushing thousands of people outside of their neighborhoods, and also the political establishment that has just allowed this to take place. And 2 weeks ago, we held a rally in Cal Anderson, a Rent Control Now rally. And despite the rainy weather, over 200 community members came out to send a clear message to the establishment that this is something that we want and that we are willing to fight for, and that we demand that they pass as our elected representatives. They have a duty, like Adam mentioned, to represent the needs of their constituents. And thousands of people, thousands of constituents across all districts agree that this is something that we desperately need. And we, at that rally, we heard from speaker after speaker, from union members, community members, activists, and everyone agrees desperately that Seattle is an unaffordable city for many working people, and we need to make sure the rent control is passed so we can keep people in their houses. And what it's going to take to actually get rent control passed, to bring it for a vote, it's going to take massive amounts of pressure on city council. That means hundreds of people sending emails, testifying and giving public comment. All of this goes to create pressure that forces the city council members to bring it for a vote and then to vote yes. We know the Democratic establishment is beholden to the real estate lobby. And we know that they do their bidding and they don't want to bring this for a vote. That the only thing that will make them is if thousands of working class people get organized, stand together, and demand that that they're brought to a vote. And already this year, we've won a whole host of renters protections. This year, we banned the eviction of school children, their families, and educators during the school year, and that faced, massive opposition from other council members and from the real estate lobby. They, like they will today, they mobilized to give, public comment. And what got that passed, what was absolutely instrumental, is the dozens of community members who called in, who called out the bad amendments being brought forth. Like saying, Councilmember Peterson, do not introduce this, how dare you introduce this watering down this amendment that will water down this legislation, and publicly calling for these council members to go on the record and stand with working people. They would prefer that all this happens in the shadows, but if we demand this and call them out in public, we can force them to vote yes, because they're relying that nobody else will see this, and we want to bring everything in the open. And we know that rent control alone isn't the magic silver bullet that will solve the housing crisis. In addition to fighting for rent control, we have to fight for much more. We have to fight for expanding the Amazon tax. And also, like our Renters Bill of Rights, this is something that we've been discussing with every single one of those 15,000 signatures that we've collected. Those two bills, the two bills are being voted on today, have been by far among the most popular demands on our Renters Bill of Rights. So when you're signing up to give public comment, know that over 15,000 people are behind you, that they have signed this down, that you are giving public comment, also speaking to their needs as well. So coming up into the public comment period, just 9 minutes away, know that we can smash through any opposition as a movement when we stand united, when we can build the pressure and keep escalating this, because we know this is going to be the end. We know we have to bring rent control for a vote before the end of this year, and that will we should be completely clear about it, that will face massive opposition. But like the two bills being voted on today, these are massively popular demands. And as a community, when we stand together, when we apply the maximum amount of pressure against the establishment politicians and the landlord lobby, we can force even the most corporate Democrat to stand with the working class and vote yes, purely on the strength of our movement. With that, I'll kick it back to Adam.
Thank you so much, Alvin, for going through that really powerful display of the community support that exists for these renter protections and for this big demand like rent control, also for taxing big business to build the tens of thousands of affordable housing, permanently affordable housing units that this city needs. But at the same time, for these renter protections, which the city council can and should pass today. Of course, we also know that the Democrats on the city council can and should pass rent control today. And likewise, on a state level, the Democrats who control both houses of the state legislature and the governor's mansion, they could also overturn with with the stroke of a pen the undemocratic ban on rent control, which has existed now for more than 40 years, and which is a real gift to landlords, as they're essentially in broad daylight gouging Seattle renters to the tune of 25.6% rent increases. That's 5 times the national average just since the start of this year, which is itself, that national average, a lot higher than it was in years past. So we see this gouging, it's like highway robbery in broad daylight of Seattle area renters. The city council has a duty to pass basic protections like 6 months notice for any rent increase without any watering down, no loopholes, no delays, and they have a duty to pass legislation which will protect, at a minimum, mitigate the impact of these skyrocketing rents so that landlords are required to pay 3 times rent when they significantly increase rents by 10% or more, and as a result, a renter has to move because of it. Now we're talking about an average rent, a 1-bedroom apartment in Seattle, which goes for $2,350 more or less. A 10% rent increase is $235 per month that this renter is going to have to pay. So it is not too much to ask that part of that additional cost be offset by the landlord. And we're talking big corporate landlords who are making hundreds of millions of dollars during a pandemic. We're going to go to Nick here in a few minutes. I'll just double down on this idea that Alvin also raised. We've won so many things this year: right to counsel for any renter facing eviction, a ban on school year evictions. Both of those are the strongest possible pieces of legislation that we've seen by comparison to other places. San Francisco's ban on school year eviction only applies when there's remodeling going on. In other words, it applies to very few renters. as Alvin indicated, we beat back all kinds of attempts to water down this legislation, to exempt, for example, to make it not apply if you didn't have a teacher certificate or something like that. And because of our fighting approach, because community members were there, as Alvin indicated, to say, we know that Councilmember Peterson is essentially a tool of corporate landlords, so he's going to put in these pro-eviction amendments. But council members Morales, Gonzalez, Herbold, are you going to stand with renters in our movement and pass Councilmember Sawant's legislation in its strongest possible form, or are you going to side with a pro-eviction amendment? With that kind of a focused pressure, we've seen time and time again that we can win the strongest possible legislation. Another example of that, before we go on to Nick Jones, who's going to get us all set up to sign up for that public comment, which we're going to do in about 4 minutes here. The right to counsel legislation that we passed in Seattle applies to every single renter. By contrast, the right to counsel legislation passed in Olympia only applies to a certain section. They inserted means testing so that a minimum wage renter in Seattle would make too much to apply to that right to counsel, to be covered by that legislation. All this is to say that we're here to prepare for the strongest possible public comment, to pass 6 months notice without any loopholes or watering down, and to pass relocation assistance 3 times rent to any renter who has to move as a result of a 10% or more increase. Please sign up for public comment. We're going to kick it over to Nick here in a minute. We know that corporate landlords are themselves going to be signing up for public comment. A couple dozen of them have emailed in already. So we need our movement's voice to be very strong. Let me go ahead right now and kick it over to Nick, who's going to get that public comment sheet up and going, as everybody watching should as well. Thank you so much for joining Councilmember Sawant's community prep meeting. And hopefully we will, as a result of this and our movement's pressure, at the end of this day, celebrate very important renters' rights victories, 6 months notice for any rent increase, and relocation assistance for people economically evicted. So thank you so much, solidarity, and Nick, take it from here.
Thank you, Adam. Hopefully folks still have this page set up, the public comment page. I'm just going to be refreshing with everyone as we prepare to sign up. And definitely after you sign up, if you haven't already, 100% send that email to the whole city council. Get someone else in your family or your friends, or just even maybe your neighbor, community member to do it with you. A lot of us live in a lot of buildings where we live really close to people. It's always more powerful and more voices are part of this. We really do need to always put the maximum pressure we can on the city council. That's really the only way we guarantee the strongest legislation possible. Otherwise, we can always expect these carve-outs and loopholes that Alvin and Adam have really powerfully described to kind of come to the fore and try to chip away at the victories that we not only deserve but absolutely need as working class renters trying to survive really in Seattle. As folks give your public comment, definitely say your name, but if you belong to a union, if you belong to a community group, political organization, something that speaks to the fact that you aren't just just one individual, but are a member of a stronger force of multitudes of folks that maybe couldn't be here but want their voice to be added to this important struggle, bring that in. That also helps really maximize the pressure that we've been talking about on the city council as well. Definitely, if you can, what you should do is say when you're giving public comment, thanks to Councilmember Swant for bringing this forward, or the council should absolutely pass without watering down these important pieces of renters' rights legislation from Councilmember Swant's office. That's not about egos. Naming the office that's actually fighting for workers and renters does also really maximize our pressure. What the council hears is that people are paying attention to who is fighting for everyday people, that the people that are giving public comment are politically engaged, and that can make them quicken their boots a little bit. Just really, you'll hear corporate landlord lobbyists say that all the time, thanking the council members that are doing their bidding. That's just something that will really put the pressure on them to hear, and definitely bring in kind of the things that we've heard today, these facts that are really powerful that Adam and Alvin have really brought forward. We really, of course, use any of these talking points, but also if you want, bring the personal story forward, really make it real. Too much of these council members just deal in the abstract. They're not really living the lives that all of us are. Average everyday people who are making an average worker's wage. That we're living a different reality. We need to bring that reality to them. I keep thinking about a renter who spoke at our rent control rally, who was talking about finally getting off the streets after a bout of homelessness, getting her son back, having some stability until she was hit with a 25% rent increase. Now she doesn't know what that's going to mean for her if she has to be homeless again. If her neighbor will have to, go into sex work to have any kind of stability. Like, that's the reality of what these rent increases mean. It's a horrible perpetration of absolute brutality on working people, and we need to stand against that. It looks like the form is live. I'm going to hit it one more time. All right, it should be live. Everyone try to sign up as fast as you can. It seems to have already filled mine out, but definitely put your name, first name, last name, whatever email address you have immediate access to. That email address, as soon as you fill out this form, you will get an email with the Zoom link to join the city council meeting at 2 p.m. So definitely use an email that you can immediately access after you submit this form. It's going to ask for the last 5 digits of your phone number. Make sure to put in the number that you are going to be calling into public comment with. That's how you'll be identified in the stack they'll be calling off of, so that when you call in, they'll know who you are, and you'll be able to speak. So definitely put in the last 5 of the phone that you will be calling into public comment with. Of course, you can check this. And then the last thing it'll ask, agenda items you're addressing. You can kind of put anything there, but I like to put in, what we're calling for, what we want to make this public comment about. We need 6-month rent increase notice. We need economic eviction assistance, rent control now. Sometimes the public comment list goes long, and maybe not everyone gets to speak. We'll all have about 1 minute, so make sure you keep that in mind. We'll probably have about 1 minute to speak. But even if you don't get to speak, the city council, they're going to get a list of everyone that signed up at the end. And if they see dozens of people that all are signed up to talk about 6-month rent increase notice, economic eviction assistance, actual renters' rights protections, that really makes an impact. So, or you can. So fill it out, just hit submit. I'm not going to, because as council staff, I cannot give public comment, but you should get others to. Send the email you can after this, after you hit the form, and we look forward to hearing from all of you in about 2 hours during the city council, where our movement's going to win these things. I believe that, but it really is going to take you. So yeah, fill us out, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Nick, for going through that again, and thanks everybody for joining us. Really excited to hear from you at 2 p.m. Solidarity.